Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how you can make your very own moss pole slash moss stick slash totem. There are a few different names for them, but basically it's a stick made out of moss that your plants will eventually, hopefully, learn to grow up. Now there is a few benefits to having a moss pole or a moss stick in your plants. The first one being it can save space. So rather than having your big luscious plants growing outways, they can grow upways, saving you space, which is great for me because I don't have a lot of space. Number two, they seem to grow bigger and better when growing upways, and I don't know why this is exactly. I would have to do some more research, but like that's enough for me. You've got me sold. If my plant is going to grow bigger and better, I'm sold. I don't need any more information than that. What we're going to need today is a piece of wool, PVC pipe, or some kind of stick. I have also done this with a piece of wood, like a wooden plank almost. You can use anything that is going to last in your plant and will be okay if it gets wet. Having said that, I did just say that I have used wood, which could potentially rot. I understand that, but it's working for me at the moment, so whatever. Just use whatever you've got. You could also use like a metal stake, a wooden stake, but I've just got a piece of PVC pipe that I picked up from Bunnings. This piece was already cut and ready to go. It is quite long, but I'm gonna leave it this long because I want it to be long. So I'm gonna leave mine this size, but if you need to cut yours, please feel free to do so. I will show you how to measure it in just a moment. Then you will of course need your moss. I am using this sphagnum moss. I got it from Bunnings Warehouse in Australia, but I'm sure you can get this around the world. It may not look exactly like this, but it is going to be the exact same thing and work exactly the same as long as it is a sphagnum moss. And lastly, you're going to need some kind of string or fishing line. I'm using fishing line today. I picked this up from my local $2 shop. I think it was, yeah, it was $2 for a lot. I think this is like 300 meters. But you could also use twine or jute or any kind of string that is going to hold your moss in place. The reason I'm using fishing line is for two reasons. Number one, it is clear. So in my opinion, it just looks better because you can't actually see it once you've attached it to your moss pole, and therefore it doesn't matter if your work is messy because you can't see it. So who cares, right? And number two, it is water resistant, so it's not going to rot, it's not going to come undone, hopefully, provided we tie it off properly. But it is made to be in water, so if it gets wet, it's fine, it's not going to rot and it's not going to lose its integrity. So in saying that, let's get started. So as I mentioned, I will show you how to measure your piece of pipe or wood or stake or whatever you're using to suit the pot that you are going to be placing it in. So I'm using it for my monstera that I've got here. As you can see, this pot is quite deep. So you want to make sure that you've got enough length at the bottom that you're going to be able to insert it in far enough that it's not going to fall over, because you want it to be nice and stable. You don't want to insert it like, you know, a couple of centimeters, because the weight of the pole is just going to make it fall over. It's not going to stand up straight. So you want to make sure that you allow enough room at the bottom so you can insert it far enough that it's going to stand up by itself. So what I'm basically doing is I've got a texture here and I'm going to just measure how deep, roughly, I think I will want to insert this pole into my monstera pot. I'm just measuring up from the bottom of the pot because I'm going to try and, depending how hard it is, it'll depend on how compact the soil is, how many roots you've got in there. We want to try not to damage the roots, obviously, so we want to try and be as gentle as we can when we're inserting the pole. But I'm going to try and get it in as deep as I can. So I am just holding the pole flush with my pot, and I'm just going to mark, say, up to here. Just roughly, with a permanent marker or texter. We're not going to be covering the whole stick with moss. We're only covering the part that is going to be above the soil. So the part that we're inserting into the pot is not going to be covered in moss. So that's the reason for that line that we've just drawn on our pole. You would obviously need to draw another line if you wanted to change the length of your pole. So if you were going to cut your piece of pipe or your stick or your stake or whatever you're using, you would want to hold it up against your pot and you'd want to mark it roughly how high you would want it to sit. As I've mentioned, I'm hoping my monstera gets really big one day, so I'm just going to leave it the full length as what it came in. But if you wanted to cut it, you would just hold it up against your pot and mark a line where you want to cut it, and then use a saw or something to just saw it off and cut it to the length that you want. All right, once our pole length is sorted, I'm just going to pop my actual plant out of the way because we don't need it for the moment. Now what we're going to do is grab a bowl and we're going to put some water in here. Just cold, normal water. Don't stress if you don't add enough because we can always add more later. And then you're going to take your sphagnum moss and you're going to pop some into that water so it can get nice and damp. Let me zoom up for you guys so you can see what I'm actually doing. So all I'm doing is just adding my moss to that water. Depending on how big your stake or your stick or your pole is will obviously depend on how much moss you're going to need. Mine's quite long, so I'm going to need a fair bit. But just keep in mind that when you do wet your sphagnum moss, it will expand. So don't go overboard at the start. We can always add more later if we need to. But just squishing that in so all that water absorbs into your moss. Add more water if you need to. You want it to be wet, but you don't want it to be like soaking wet that it's sitting in a pool of water. You should have it so there's no, like you can see now, there's no more water left in my bowl. It's all soaked into here, which is what we want. We don't want it to be sitting in a big pool of water. It just makes it messy and hard to work with. So once you've worked your moss for a little bit and it's all nice and damp, try and separate it up a little bit. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more water. All right, just going to separate this up a bit so it makes it a bit easier for us to work with because we're going to be working with one hand. I'll explain why shortly. I'm just going to move this to the side for now. We're then going to take our pole, find the line that we drew for where we want to stop. So that's my line there, so I don't want to be putting moss past that. Whoops, it's just smudged. So this whole section here is going to be moss. Once I get to this line here, we're going to stop because that's the area that is going to be inserted into the soil. If you were to cover this area in moss, it's going to be really hard for you to insert into the soil. So that's why we say leave that little bit naked, because it's just gonna make your life a lot easier. Okay, now I'm just gonna grab a pair of scissors so I'm not fumbling to get them later on. We don't need them right now, but just for later. Okay, what we're going to do now is take some of our fishing line. Don't cut any off, just unravel it a little bit so you've got a little bit of length to work with. And just sit it to the side for now. We're then going to grab a clump of moss and we're going to begin coating our pole, our pipe I should say, or whatever you're using. As I said, you can use anything really. All right, and to begin, all I'm going to do is take our fishing line and just to secure it before we begin with the rest of the moss, we're just going to tie it off. Nice and tight, don't stress like what it looks like, or as long as it's tight, that is the main thing. And if you want to do a few knots, I like to do 3 or 4 knots just to make sure it is really nice and secure, so we don't want it to fall off. One more for good luck. Okay. Don't worry if you've still got a bit of length there, we can go back and trim that off later. So don't stress, it does not need to be perfect. Again, this is why I said we use fishing line, because you can't see it, so it doesn't need to be perfect. So all we're going to do is place some more moss on our pole, and as we're doing that, we're wrapping. So this is why I said we're going to be working with one hand, because one hand's going to be wrapping and going to have tension on our fishing line at all times. Otherwise it's just going to come undone. So you need to make sure that you're holding it nice and tight. It sounds tricky, but you do get the hang of it. When I was watching a YouTube tutorial on how to do this, I was like, how the hell am I going to do that? That was way too hard. But once you start doing it, you actually, like, you get in the rhythm of it and it's actually fine. So don't stress. So basically we're just wrapping and placing moss as we go. I don't recommend doing huge chunks at once, because you're going to find that a lot of it will fall off. Some will fall off anyway, as you can see, but that's all right. You just pick it up and pop it back into your bowl. Just remembering to keep tension on your fishing line at all times. Otherwise, it's going to make it really, really hard, because it's just going to end up falling apart. It is a slow process, but as I said, you do kind of get used to the technique. So you will get faster as you go along. I just like to go in, and after I've done, like, I've coated one whole section, I just go around and just secure it down again before I start adding more. But you'll figure out what works for you and what you're finding is working best. But we're just going to continue doing this until we reach our line that we drew on earlier. Okay, so I have run out of moss now, so I'm just going to make up some more. So I just want to show you how I sit this if I need to walk away from it so it doesn't come undone. So what I'm going to do is just secure that last bit there that I've just added, and then I'm going to rotate my pole so the fishing line and the bit that I've just secured is at the bottom. So the weight of the pole is now on that, which means it should stay nice and secure so you can walk away from it. Just make sure nobody touches it. So if you're walking away to make dinner or make a coffee or something and you've got people or kids home, just make sure they don't touch it, because you don't want them to undo all of your hard work. So I'm going to walk away from this now. I'm going to go grab some more moss and I will be right back. All right, so I can see now that I have reached my line here. So I'm just gonna add one last bit in, secure that. And now what I'm going to do is go with my fishing line all the way back up the pole just to secure any other little bits. You may also find that you've got some gaps that you might want to add some more moss into, but I'm just going to go all the way back up my pole just to secure any little bits that may be loose and fill in any gaps. All right, here we are back at the beginning. Actually, I might just put a little bit extra on the top there. Beautiful. Now you'll see here that we've still got our little end here. I don't know if you can see it. Obviously the fishing wire is clear, so it's hard for you guys to see. If I hold this under it. There is that end of fishing line here. If you've already cut yours off, that is totally fine. You'll just have to try and tie your end off by going in under a bit of fishing wine. I need a glass of wine. By going in under your fishing line. But because I've still got this end here, I'm going to use that to tie it off. So what I'm going to do is cut my line now, obviously just holding that there and holding tension on the line because you don't want all your hard work to come undone. Oh my God, these scissors are horrible. Change hands. I think it's because I'm using my left hand. Oh my God, these scissors are horrible. There we go. Okay. So I've cut that off now. So now what I'm going to do is grab that end from the beginning when we started, and I'm just going to tie these ends together. Nice and tight. If you need someone to help you by holding their finger there, by all means do that. I don't have anyone home with me right now, so I'm just going to try and do it myself. But that is why I mentioned at the beginning, I always go in and do like 3 or 4 knots just to make sure that it is nice and tight. And one more, just to be safe. All right, once that is nice and secure, I'm going to tidy those ends off. Oh my God, these scissors are horrible. They need to go in the bin. All right, and we are done. I'm just going to tidy up this bench and then we will insert it into our plant. Okay, so I know you guys can't see me, but I've tried to position the camera on the plant so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got my pot back now. Now, by all means, if you were repotting a plant or if you wanted to remove the entire plant, if it was a really mature plant, and you wanted to remove the entire plant and insert this first and then place the plant back in around it, by all means do that. That is going to be the safest way to do it, and that is going to be the least damaging way to insert your moss pole without damaging your plant. I'm not going to do that. I am being lazy and I'm going to just insert it directly into the pot. Now, I have done a little bit of investigating to try and see. I've tried to dig out a little bit here just to see in which direction the roots are going, because obviously this is a monstera. It had a few aerial roots when I repotted it, and I know that now they are growing into the ground or into the soil. So I have done a little bit of investigating. So if you can do that as well, I definitely recommend going in and having a look, if you can, to see which direction the roots are going and try and stay away from them as much as possible. Now, I am just going to hope for the best. I've done a little bit of investigating and I have decided that I'm going to insert my pole into this little section here. So I have dug out a little bit, as much as I can, just with my hand, just to kind of help the process. Now, because I've used a piece of pipe, the middle is hollow. So I'm hoping that will help the insertion process because the middle's hollow. So here goes. Let's see how we go. Look, so far so good. I should have probably done this on the ground so I could put my weight onto it. I think I'm gonna move. Hold up. Okay, so I've moved it onto the ground because I feel like I do need to be able to like put my weight into pushing it down. So here goes. I don't know if it's that it's already all the way in or if it's just hard. I mean, it is standing up by itself, so I'm fairly happy with the stability of it. This Monstera is actually due for a soil top up, so I'm going to do that now as well. I'm just going to top it up with some soil, so that will probably help it be a bit more stable. But I think it's all the way in. It was quite easy. It wasn't too bad. It actually wasn't as hard as what I thought it was going to be, so that's always good. I'm just going to quickly top this pot up with some soil, and I'll be back. Okay, so now that I have topped up the soil, the pole is nice and sturdy, which is good. Sorry I'm ducking down like this, but I wanted to set the frame up so you guys could see the plant. So what I've done now is just cut, you probably can't see because it's clear, but I've just cut a couple of lengths of fishing line. You could use jute string, you could use like gardening tape or gardening string if you prefer, but I'm just using fishing line. And I'm just going to go gently, again, gently around your plant, and we're just going to tie your plant loosely, and I repeat, very loosely to your pole. This is just going to help train your plant to grow upways. Okay, so chances are, if it hasn't had a moss pole in it before, it has just been growing wherever it likes. So we now need to try and train it to grow up, which is what this string is doing. And you don't want to, obviously, you don't want to damage your plant. So if, like for instance, this leaf here that's growing out this way, sorry guys, the lighting's not great. If I'm to force it to go up here, chances are maybe it's going to break the leaf. So again, we do still want to train it to grow upways. So what I'm going to do is train it gradually. So rather than bringing it all the way up to the moss pole and tying it like that, I'm going to tie it maybe like halfway between where I want it to be and where it was, because that's going to help it to learn that it's going to need to grow that way. Once it's learned that it needs to grow upways, you can tighten the string. But for now, I'm just going to tie it, as I said, about halfway between where I want it to be and halfway between where it was, just so we can gradually train it to grow upways. And again, you want it to be tied really loosely, guys. Don't over tighten it because it's going to damage your plant. Obviously, that's the last thing we want. We do not want any damaged plants because of this. We only want to make our plants better. So please don't tighten it too much. I'm just going in now and just rearranging the leaves so they aren't overlapping each other. And I'm just going to grab my scissors and give those a little bit of a trim. So just trimming off that fishing line there. Again, these scissors are horrible. And there we have it, guys. We're done. So the last thing I just want to mention is with the moss pole, you want to keep it moist at all times. So obviously the point of a moss pole is to grow roots around it, but those roots still need water. So if your moss pole is completely dry, the roots are not going to be drawn to your moss pole. The roots are going to want to grow where there is moisture. So make sure you keep your moss pole wet at all times. I have found, especially lately with my other moss pole that I made, it dries out so quickly. I need to wet it, like I'm talking twice a day. Because it is winter and I've got my heater going for majority of the day, it dries it out so quickly. So I just wanted to remind you guys that you do need to keep your moss pole wet at all times. If it dries out, it's not going to promote the growth of new roots, okay? So just make sure you're keeping your moss poles wet. But other than that, that is all I have for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you did find it helpful. If you did enjoy it, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on your notifications so you will be notified of all my future videos. If you have any content ideas or any videos you would like me to film specifically, please comment them down below. I would love to hear your suggestions. And if you did try this technique and it worked for you and you found it helpful, comment down below as well, because I love to know when you guys give things that I've mentioned or taught you guys how to do in a video a go. So let me know if you did try this. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, stay safe, be kind, and I will see you next time. Thanks guys, bye.